Hey, Marcus Hutzel here with another Audio 101 series video. And in this video, I'm going to talk about a balance between extremes when it comes to your audio setup. Whether that's in your home studio with USB audio interfaces and XLR microphones, or USB microphones, or whether it's in a live production environment with multiple microphones and amplifying that sound with a few or lots of speakers. And I'm going to show you some practical examples of this as well with some very simple and inexpensive audio equipment a bit later in this video. But remember, with any audio gear in any situation and any signal flow you have, you usually want to avoid extremes. What do I mean by that? Well, we're using electronic equipment to take sounds we hear in the air with our ears, converting that acoustic energy into electricity with microphones, both wired and wireless mics, then amplifying and processing those electric signals with mic preamps, audio consoles, compressors, USB audio interfaces, and software. And all of these pieces of equipment and software have built-in controls for processing this electric audio signal as it passes into and out of each piece of equipment. Controls like input gain knobs and output knobs and faders, switches, etc. that tell you whether you're sending or should be receiving usually mic level or line level signals. And you always want to be aware of and usually try to avoid being at the extreme ends of any of the controls of your equipment. For example, take a microphone gain knob on a mixing console or USB audio interface. If you're finding that you have to turn the gain all the way up, but you still can't get enough gain on your meters or in your software, that's a sign you may have a problem upstream, because why are you unable to gain a microphone to a good level, but you have no more gain to give? Maybe there's something wrong with your mic, or maybe you need a preamp that can provide more gain. And in this scenario, if you were at the maximum gain on a preamp, you might induce more noise into the signal from the preamp itself if the preamp is of low quality. And if your signal is too low coming in, then you will most likely end up with more noise later, because you'll probably have to boost this low signal again later in our signal chain and will therefore be boosting noise with it. Alternatively, if you've plugged in a microphone or other signal and you've got the gain all the way down, but you're still clipping out the input and can't turn it down anymore, that's also a sign you may have a problem elsewhere, again, most likely upstream in your signal chain that you need to fix before continuing. So in both of these examples, either turned all the way up at the top of the knob or turned all the way down at the bottom of a knob, you have nowhere to go if there's a problem. You can't turn it up anymore, or maybe you can't turn it down anymore. And you will be unable to fix the signal if you are at the extreme ends of any of the adjustment knobs on any piece of equipment. This is kind of like painting yourself into a corner. We don't want to do that. We need to have options to control our audio signals. We need to have headroom so we don't clip, and we need to have bottom room where we can turn down if needed. We always want to send our audio through our equipment with enough adjustment at each point along the way to get ourselves out of audio trouble. If you find you're at the extreme ends of any of your knobs, faders, or other gain stage points in your system, I would highly advise you to stop and figure out why you have to turn all the way up or why you can't seem to turn down enough, because this usually means you're not gain staging your equipment properly. Another couple of quick examples. Let's say you're using an audio compressor, be it digital or analog. If you find that you have to turn your compressor threshold way down just to grab your input signal and start compressing, you probably don't have enough input gain on the preamp. So maybe think about increasing the gain on the preamp to give your EQ and your compressor what it really wants to be able to operate properly. Or let's say your signal coming into your mixing console or your audio interface is clipping or close to clipping even when you have the gain turned all the way down. That's another sign you've got a gain stage problem. This goes for any audio equipment. Take this Tascam DR-40 audio recorder. If I plug a signal into input 1 and the signal is coming in really hot like you can see here, I can try to turn down the input gain on the recorder with the gain buttons on the left. There's an input level here on the left, plus and minus, and we can try to turn that down. But as you can see right here, I can't go down any further. I'm at the lower end or the extreme bottom end of the input gain on this recorder. And the signal is pretty hot, but as you can see, we're not clipping. So maybe this recording would be okay. But what if the signal upstream gets louder? That might clip out the audio and this recording would be ruined. I have nowhere to go. I can't turn down anymore, so I would consider this a situation where I've been painted into a corner. Now, granted, there are plenty of 32-bit float digital audio recorders out there, like the Sound Devices Mix Pre-Series or the Zoom F3 or F8N Pro, and recorders like those obviously exist, and may take care of your problems, but not every recorder is 32-bit float, and a lot of audio equipment is still standard 16 or 24-bit maximum bit depth, especially in the live audio world, mixing and amplifying live bands or microphones for corporate events. So you still need to know what to do if you're at the extremes of any of your equipment. So given that this Tascam DR-40 isn't a 32-bit float recorder and the audio on this recorder can be clipped and ruined if the signal and settings aren't correct, what do I do? Well, whatever I need to do to make sure I have enough control at this location, at this recorder, so I can turn up or down if needed. So let's say I don't have any control of the signal upstream. Let's say someone else is sending me this signal and I get what I get. What do I do? Well, I could add something like an XLR pad into the signal chain to reduce the incoming signal. This one will change the signal by 20 dB, so it will pad or reduce the signal coming in by 20 dB as it passes through this XLR pad. It will literally reduce the voltage coming in so that this recorder can then handle the signal. And we'll test that real quick. We can see here, there's our signal coming into the recorder. It's very hot. I can't turn down anymore. I'll pull the input, not changing anything else. I'll put the pad in line and I'll plug this back in. And now we can see our signal has been reduced. And then if we needed to, we can actually use the gain control on the left and gain our signal up or down. Now we're not painted into a corner. We have control up or down if needed by using a pad. So let's take that back out and get to our hotter level signal. There we go. We're back, peaking out again. But of course, if someone else is feeding me that signal and they do have the ability to adjust the level to me, then I can just ask them to turn it down. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm actually sending the signal from this mixer over to the Tascam recorder via the control room output. So I can turn this up and you can see the signal go up on the Tascam. I can turn this down and you can see the signal go down. And this is a very common situation you might find yourself in. If you're in the live audio world, you've got maybe a larger format mixer with more than 1 or 2 mic inputs. Maybe you've got 10 or 12 mic inputs or 20, who knows. So a larger mixer and the audio operator is going to send you a record feed, and they may or may not have the ability to turn the feed to you up or down. So you need to have tools at your disposal to be able to do that accordingly at your gear. Now, in one of my other videos, I talk about giving your audio equipment what it expects. And I touched briefly on the fact that on some equipment, you can change or tell that equipment what to expect in terms of audio levels. And that, luckily, is the case with this particular audio recorder. So on any piece of equipment, just check the rest of the controls on your device and know your equipment. On this Tascam DR-40, there's a switch on the side that says EXTN for external N, and there are 3 options: line, mic, and mic plus phantom. And we need to understand what these switches do on this or any device. And specifically on this one, they are asking the operator, that's you, what level are you sending to the inputs? Currently have this set to mic. So the recorder thinks I'm sending a mic level signal, or it thinks and expects that I'm sending a low level audio signal into the inputs. So it either kind of pre-boosts the signal, or at least it doesn't reduce or it doesn't pad the signal automatically, because I've told it I'm sending you a low level mic signal. If you don't understand mic level versus line level, I have a video about that. I'll link it below. So if I have this switch set to mic and the DR-40 is expecting a low level signal, but then I send it a hotter signal, something closer to a line level signal into input 1, even with the input gain all the way down on the Tascam, you can see that we weren't able to turn down enough with the input gain on the side, and we probably would have clipped out our signal and been painted into a corner. Now let's say we don't have any XLR pads at our disposal, and we, for whatever reason, can't have the audio operator turn it down. He or she just can't turn it down. We're getting what we get. Well, know your equipment. Luckily, on this device, with that EXTN selector switch, I can just tell the recorder that it should expect a hotter line level signal coming into the inputs. So if I just move this switch over to line and we watch the input meters here, look at that. The signal was reduced simply by telling the recorder to expect a line level signal. I switched the switch over to line, it told the input expect line level, and it padded and reduced the signal before it hit the preamp. And now, simply because I put that on line, I now have more ability to use the input gain buttons on the side to control my signal to a finer grain of detail. And now I'm no longer painted into a corner. I'm no longer at the extreme lower end of my gain controls or the upper end of my gain controls. I have options with my equipment to control and record my signal appropriately. So some other devices, like maybe this Behringer UM2 audio interface that have combo inputs that will accept either an XLR or a 1/4 inch balanced cable on a single input, but obviously not at the same time. So I can plug in an XLR cable into input 1, or I can plug in a balanced TRS 1/4 inch cable into input 1. Now, some of these devices that have combo inputs like this are kind of preset to expect different levels depending on if you use an XLR cable or if you use a 1/4 inch cable on the input. Typically, if you plug an XLR cable into these combo style inputs, the device is expecting a low level mic signal, and it will also kind of pre-boost the signal, or at least it won't apply any gain reduction, or it won't pad the signal or attenuate it, because again, it literally thinks you're plugging in a microphone to the preamp, therefore a mic level signal, a lower voltage, and you'll need the full range of the preamp to boost the signal appropriately, because that's input 1's primary purpose on this UM2 as a microphone preamp. But on the UM2, if you adapt your XLR balanced signal into a balanced 1/4 inch TRS plug using the proper cable, the UM2 and a lot of other similar devices using combo inputs like this will usually now expect a hotter line level signal. So the devices will apply their own internal pad to reduce the signal so that you now have more control of your knobs to gain up or down the signal. And we can demonstrate this really quickly. We've got my iPad feeding out a sine wave over to this small mixer. The mixer is feeding the XLR cable. So we're going to leave all that alone. We're going to take this, we're going to plug it into input 1 using an XLR cable on the UM2. We've got our gain all the way down. We can see that we're clipping out the preamp, and we can see in Adobe Audition, we're basically clipping. Now, without changing anything volume-wise, without touching any knobs, I'm going to simply unplug this XLR cable. I'm going to take this XLR to 1/4 inch cable. Again, this is a 1-to-1 XLR to TRS balanced cable. We can see here, got tip, ring, sleeve. Nothing else has changed other than me changing the type of cable that I'm plugging in input 1. Plug into input 1, and now we can see, number 1, we're not clipping out the preamp, and we can also now see in Adobe Audition that our signal has been reduced by about 15 dB. So on the UM2, simply by changing the type of cable we plug in input 1, we get a 15 dB pad. Now we have more play in our gain knob. We have a lot of room to go before we start clipping out, and we're not painted into a corner. So really easy fix if you don't have an XLR pad and you can't tell your audio operator to turn down the signal over to you. Try the 1/4 inch input on most combo inputs. That'll solve your problem a lot of the time. But that's not the case with every combo style input. You've got to know your equipment and know what it expects. Just because it's a combo style input doesn't necessarily mean it performs the same way as the UM2. You've got to read the manual and look for switches, controls, or labeling that tells you what the input is and what it's meant for and how it will perform. Then keep checking your signals and your audio meters. As a contrary example, let's go back to the Tascam. The DR-40 also has these combo style inputs. I can plug in an XLR or a 1/4 inch into inputs 1 or 2. However, let's test this theory. Let's put our selector back on mic so that this device is expecting microphone level in the external inputs. I'll plug in the 1/4 inch input. Look at that. We're still peaking out. So simply changing over to use the 1/4 inch portion of input 1 on the combo input had no effect on the level coming into this device, because this device doesn't have those like auto selectable levels on the combo inputs. You still have to tell this device what to expect. And we do that with the same switch on the side. So we're set to mic, it's expecting a mic level, we're still feeding it line level. So we'll switch that to line, and there we can see the level dropped because we told the Tascam by switching this to line to then pad the signal that's coming in here before it gets to the preamp, so that we now have a lower level signal and we can now gain up or down the signal and we're not painted into a corner. So another example of how these combo inputs don't work the same as this combo input on this device just because they look the same. Got to know your equipment, got to read the switches or the user manual. So we've solved these problems in a number of ways. XLR pads, reading the switches in our devices to know what they do and what they're telling our devices to do, trying different cables on the same input, because again, this input senses different things depending on what cable you plug in. Or in the most simple of cases, we've told our audio operator to turn down their send to us so that our level on our device doesn't clip out. So Knowing your equipment, knowing what it's doing, and what you can do to get yourself out of being at the extreme ends of your equipment is the entire point here. Know your equipment and have options to get yourself out of those situations. And the same thing applies to any audio equipment, whether it's more consumer-based devices like this Tascam recorder or this USB audio interface, or whether it's more professional level devices like this DBX286S mic preamp, or my Zoom F8N field recorder, or whether it's a professional mixing console in a live environment with a bunch of wireless microphones. You've got to remember every point in your gain staging. And as you can see, there are lots of points in our audio signal chain that you have to check. Keep this in mind as well when the signal gets sent out of your mixing console and over to powered speakers or your amplifiers. Your amps and speakers also expect certain audio levels to work efficiently and quietly. Gain staging. Start at the beginning, work your way towards the end, and never in reverse. Know your equipment. Know what the switches do, when to activate or change them, know what level your equipment is expecting coming in, and know what level your equipment is or should be sending over to the next piece of equipment. And the point here is to always make sure you're not at the extreme ends of your devices, your knobs, and your switches. Always make sure you have options to control your signal and never paint yourself into a corner. And honestly, that's some of the best advice I can give. Make sure you can get out of audio trouble, and you'll have great sounding audio every time. All right, I hope this little bit of information has been helpful. Good luck, happy recording and amplifying. So until next time, later.